Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, I'm going to show you guys a method of how to identify what kind of transmission you have. And this is for really the people that want to know if they have the S40 or S20 short gear or long gear transmissions. Because aside from that code, you don't know what what is it, like if it's the long gear version or the short gear version. But before we even get to that, I just want to give you guys a quick update on what I have planned for the EF next. So as you can see behind me, I have another bumper on the wall. Now, the reason for that bumper is one, it was free. So I got that completely free, and I wanted to keep a bumper that has no fog light holes cut in it. So the original plan was that top bumper that I cut out for the fog light holes, we were gonna prep that and get it ready and paint it and then install it on the car and run that with the fog lights. Now that I have the other bumper that's free, that doesn't have the fog light cutouts, so I could technically cut the one that's already painted on my car and mount the fog lights. That way I could rock the OEM fog lights and I don't have to do any more body work. So I'm still unsure at this point, but that's kind of the plan for that extra bumper. It's just basically a spare for me to keep until I decide what I want to do for the fog lights. That way, if I ever did cut the one that's already on my car, I can always revert to no fog light look if I ever wanted to. Don't know why I would, but I can. And it's always good to keep a spare just in case, because if, say, those fog lights get damaged, for example, I'm not going to be able to find another set. And let's be real here, it's probably easier to go back to the OEM look with no fog lights than it is to source another set of fog lights. So that's kind of why I have another bumper and why I keep collecting bumpers. Now, the second thing that I have for you guys is that we're going B-swap. So I picked this thing up. This is a B18B1. It's got a cable YS1 transmission, which leads me to why we're doing this video. I don't know if that's a GSR transmission or a regular LS GSRS transmission. So today we're going to put this, or we're going to take it apart, and then we're going to identify that transmission, as well as put this engine on the engine stand. That bumper bar right there is the one that came with the spare bumper. It's kind of mangled a little bit, but that's going to my friend Andrew anyways. He just wants it to cut up and chop up and do something with it. So I was going to just toss it out, but he wants it, so whatever. But this is the engine here. It's got a B18A1 manifold. From what I can tell, it's got this cool JDM Greddy oil cap. The funny thing is, I noticed that these injectors here, they're actually DSM injectors. So the person that sold it to me said that these injectors came out of a GSR, and these injectors didn't work for the GSR swap, so they took the injectors out of this engine and put the other ones on here. So essentially, these are turbo injectors. I mean, I don't think this motor was turbocharged. If it was, then maybe we have other issues aside from the parts not being right, essentially. So we are going to go over in the next many videos. We're going to strip this whole thing apart and do a whole overhaul on it. I'm going to show you guys how to check everything to make sure if you need to send it to the machine shop or not. We're going to clean it all up, essentially do a full rebuild on it, and then we're going to drop it into my Civic. Wasn't planning on a B-swap, but I guess we are going B-swap now, guys. So now let's just kind of pull the transmission off, and then we are going to set up my new engine stand as well, and we're going to put this engine onto the engine stand. All right, guys, so the first thing we're going to do is set up this engine stand here. I picked this up on sale. The box is all kind of mangled. I guess one of these things is quite heavy. So I put it on my rollerboard. I was originally intending the rollerboard to be where I'm putting my engine and just roll around, but might as well just put it on an engine stand because we're going to work on it anyways. So let's just get started to putting this together. All right, so the assembly instructions are not very clear. Essentially just shows me a diagram and just to put it together. I mean, I'm sure I could figure it out. Yeah, that's all it is in this instructions. So we'll follow it along. But before we do that, let's just start assembling everything and checking that everything's here. All right, so now it's time to remove the transmission. All right, engine's lifted up. Now I'm bolting all the brackets and all that stuff that hold the transmission down before we actually do an inspection on the transmission. So let's just start taking all this stuff apart. All right, the transmission is all fully unbolted now. All I have to do is really just lift it. So let's put on some gloves so I get a good grip here. There we go. All right, now time to lift the transmission out of the way. All right, guys, so one thing I couldn't figure out earlier, I don't have it on film or anything, but is this transmission kept leaking oil all over the place. I don't know why. It wasn't from the axle seals or anything like that. It was clearly from this area. So it was missing this backup switch. This is my D series one from my spare SI transmission. So I pulled that just to put this in. So I put a copper washer in there because I didn't have any aluminum ones, but that fits fine. I tested it with a multimeter and it does switch on when you put it in reverse. So the switch seems to be interchangeable, D series and B series. But the only thing is it's always different part number. I did do a search and the part numbers are different. I don't know if it binds or not. We'll test that in a bit just to spin the input shaft and all that just to see if this actually impacts anything, but I don't think so. I think this should be fine. Yeah, so kind of disappointing. It was missing a backup switch. All right, guys, so now we're on to the part of the video where I show you guys how to determine what kind of transmission you have. This is all going to be based off of gear ratios, so this is applicable to all the Honda transmissions. So this is a good way to test what you have. This is only going to be applicable to all factory unmodified transmissions. If it's modified and somebody tells you it's modified with X amount gear, you could always do the calculation and determine if they're actually correct as well. Now, this here is a YS1 transmission. It was made for the 92 to 93 Integra. So it was in the GSR for the shorter gear as well as the GSRS and LS, which is the longer gear. Now, the calculation you have to do is you take the gear ratios from 1 to 5 gears, 1 to 5 gears, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and multiply that by the final drive. Now, what that number tells you is how many spins of the input shaft, which is your engine, it takes to get one spin of this. Now, I've done the calculation on a piece of sticky paper here. So the GS, you can see these are all the ratios that we will get. Now, the widest or the biggest change difference ones is second and third gear. So we'll test both those gears and I'll show you how to determine what kind of transmission you have based off of those spins. Now, you got to mark off your transmission. So I've marked it off up here. There's a marking here, as well as a marking down here and down here, just to track how many spins I do. Now, the GSR, we'll do third gear first. GSR has a 6.4 turns here to get 1 turn of this. Now, GS, LS, and RS will get 5.5 turns. So let's shift it into third gear, and we'll do a spin test, and we'll determine if this is a GSR or a LS, RS, GS transmission. Now, to shift it into third gear, you just pull straight back. There you go. It's in third. Now, remember what I said. It takes, if it's a GSR, it's 6.4. If it's a LS, it's going to be 5.5. So that's 1 turn, 2 turns, 3, 4, 5, and as you can see, the markings are already pretty close. That's 5.5. So this here is a GS transmission. If it was 6.4 turns, that would indicate it's a GSR transmission, but this is not the shorter gear one. Now we'll put it back, and then we'll check second gear as well. Okay, so everything's back lined up with the markings. Now we're going to shift it into second. And that would be shifting to the left and pushing forward. That's a little difficult with this little screwdriver I have here, but there's not a lot of space. So to the side, push forward. All right. So for second gear, it would be 8.17 turns for a GS, as well as 9.26 turns for a GSR. So let's check if it's 8 turns or if it's 9 turns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and you see that's pretty close. 8.17 around there, I'll say. Yep, so this is definitely a GS LS, RS transmission. And this will be applicable to any of transmissions that you do. So you just have to turn it back to put it back to the right markings. Otherwise, it's not going to be lined up when you start. You always make new markings, but it's kind of easier if you have the same markings. All right, so after you're done your test, you can easily wipe off the markers with some acetone or something like that, which is what I'm going to use. Yeah, because I have only used the Sharpie to put it on, and Sharpie wipes right off with acetone. All right, guys, so before we even put this engine onto the engine stand, we're going to have to take off the clutch and flywheel. So right off the bat, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but these bolts are wrong. They're supposed to be 12-point bolts. So whoever the previous owner is, or whoever did the service for the clutch, swapped it with some different bolts. Yeah, that's kind of expected. Sometimes people just do weird things like that. I don't know how good these bolts are, but definitely they're supposed to be 12-point bolts. If you look them up on Honda, it's always 12-point bolts for all these transmissions. I think I have some laying around, but yeah, we're just going to gun these off, and then we're going to pull both the flywheel off as well as the clutch assembly, and then we could kind of figure out how do we want to put it onto the engine stand. There we go. And we'll check this clutch disc later. It looks okay so far. Doesn't look too old, so I could probably reuse this. But these are ARP. I wonder if these are, oh, these are ARP as well. I guess that's why these were switched. That was a pain in the ass to take off. ARP bolts. Hella strong. Definitely strong. Now the flywheel comes off. Here we go. This thing's got some grease on it. Definitely needs some cleaning. Alright, now we're kind of good to put it on the engine stand. Alright guys, so I couldn't mount this engine stand onto the engine. Reason being is these things were too long, so I have cut them. So now when I fit the bolt in there, it actually can bolt onto the engine. Now I hate modifying tools because it's really permanent, but I had no other choice. Other engine stands aren't this long, and I didn't want to spend a whole bunch of money on getting new bolts. So this works for me because I just cut it and then I grinded it down to flat. So yeah, now we could bolt it onto the engine. Alright guys, there it is. Engine is on the engine stand. A lot of work having to modify the stand and all. I'm not a big fan of this engine stand, but it's new. I got it for a good deal because it was on sale. Anyways, I guess the next step is basically to start cleaning the engine. But I'm going to call it a day. It's kind of late now. Anyways, I hope the transmission information helped you guys out. If you haven't already, please comment, like, and subscribe, and share my videos. As always, guys, I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.